friends, it's Mrs. Kathy again. I'm here to read you a story. I am going to read you Mr. Seahorse by Eric Carle. He wrote and illustrated the book. Do you remember hearing his name before, Eric Carle? We've read other books by him, such as Brown Bear, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and The Very Busy Spider, among other things. Before I read you the story, I'm going to read you something that Mr. Carle wrote on the back of the book. Dear friends, in most fish families, after the mother has laid the eggs and the father has fertilized them, the eggs are left on their own. But there are exceptions, such as the seahorse, stickleback, tilapia, Curtis nursery fish, pipefish, bullhead catfish, and some others. Not only are the eggs cared for by a parent, but surprise, that parent is the father. This may sound strange, but it is the truth. And this is my story about them. I hope you enjoy my story. Eric Carle. This is what he wrote. Okay. Mr. Seahorse. Isn't he pretty? Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist. It's time for me to lay my eggs, she said. Can I help? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Oh yes, thank you, said Mrs. Seahorse. And she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. I will take good care of them, said Mr. Seahorse. I promise. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpetfish hidden in the reeds. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Stickleback? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Delighted, replied Mr. Stickleback. I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch. Keep up the good work, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden among the coral. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Tilapia? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know, said Mr. Seahorse. Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch. Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. You must be very happy, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Curtis? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Perfectly fine, replied Mr. Curtis. Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch. You are doing a good job, said Mr. Seahorse, and he swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Pipe? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and he swam along the way. I wonder why he's called a pipefish. What do you think? But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. "Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. Now I am babysitting." "You are doing a fine job," said Mr. Seahorse, and he swam on his way. Look at all the baby fish. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. How many do you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's a lot of seahorse. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. "Oh no," said Mr. Seahorse. "I do love you, but now you're ready to be on your own." And that, my friends, is the end. See you next time. Bye.